So just one thing I forgot to do with this. Let me see if I can. Sometimes it looks like it's working, but I'm just going to grab my BP Night. Let me drag a version of this onto the screen. Just going to alt click on this. And let's get these over the top of each other. A bit difficult to see with a camera there. But sometimes having these overlapping, so say if you're doing sprite background on this as well, having the sprites overlapping each other can sometimes cause issues. So let me just delete both of these. In terms of materials, what we can do, let me go back to my BP Night. Click on here. So on our actual sprite, so we've got two elements to this. Normally you'd have a material and an object, but the flipbook is creating the color and all the detail that we need. This material is how it's kind of like the masking of it, how it sits against the background. So what I want to do is I want to change this. So if I click on it, actually on there isn't the thing that we need. So what we need to do is go into this settings, and I'm going to switch on engine and plugin content. Okay, and I'm going to search for translucent unlit, and it's this bottom one here, translucent unlit sprite material. I want to set this to that material. Okay, so it's just going to do a better job. Let's compile and save that. It doesn't like it's changed anything, and sometimes you can't see the issue, but it's better to do it to be safe rather than sorry. Okay, so that's done that. Look at position them a different time. So now let's set it's whenever you create any sprites, it's best to do that for every single one, by the way. Just make sure that when you go into it that you do have this show engine content, show plugin content selected. Okay, so let's start creating our input. So I'm going to go back in. I'm going to go into my input folder, and then we're going to create two things. We're going to create the actual the movement itself, or the type of movement we're going to use, and then a system that we can add our controllers to. So let's go in. Let's go into the input, and this input action is the first thing I'm going to do. So for every input that we want, so if we've got a move, if we've got a jump, if we've got a crouch, if we've got an attack, every single one we need an input action. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to name this IA for input action underscore, and I'm going to call this run. Actually, what I'll do is call it night run, and then if we had other characters, we can search for them in particular. So we got that. I'm going to double click on this, and all I'm going to set is this value type. So it defaults to a digital boolean. That's just going to give us a 1 or 0 value. For this one, I want to have maybe something like an axis 2D. This is going to give me the ability to be able to go left and right and also jump up and down. But we're not going to have a y-axis on this. It's going to be, say, on our x-axis and our z-axis. If we just want left and right, we can do an axis 1D. And if I want all three, we can do the axis 3D. So let's keep it on this axis 2D for now. Click on save. Go into our content browser. Again, let's right click. I'm going to do an input, and this time I'm going to choose this input mapping context. So this is going to be the thing that allows me to bring all my movements in, and then all my inputs in, and actually set up keyboard bindings or controller bindings with those. So let's click on this. I'm going to call it IMC for input mapping context underscore night. Let's say night car. So I'm going to double click on this. So the first thing we're going to do is add a mapping. So let's click on the plus. And then over here, I can click on the none, and we can just choose. You see there's only one there because I've only created one. If we had more, they'd appear here. So I'm going to choose this IA night run. If I go into this, we've got one keyboard bind already. So we can search for our different things. I could go in keyboard and choose a key, but actually the easiest way to do this is click on this little keyboard and then we can click on the key. So I'm going to choose D for my moving right. We need another one of these, so I'm going to click on this plus up here. This is our next one, so I'm going to click on this and I'm going to click A for my other movement. So the other thing I need to do for this is set one of these up so it reverses the action. So right now these are essentially doing the same thing. So the D key is moving right, and that's fine, the positive value. The negative value, we need to do something with this A key. So what we do is go into modifiers. We just click on the plus and add a modifier onto this. And then in this none, we're going to set this to negate. So it's going to do the negative of this. So if this is 1, this is going to be -1. Okay. So again, let's save this. Let's close this down. So the next thing we need to do is actually have this player recognize those inputs. So we need to go to the event graph. I'm going to do this in an event begin play. So as soon as the character's in the level, it recognizes its inputs. So I'm just going to click off this note here. I'm going to get rid of these for a second. We don't need these right now. I'm going to start with this event begin play. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the controller. And from the controller, we want to tell our player that it's going to add this mapping context on. So I'm going to drag from this. I'm going to do a cast to player controller. Okay. Let's plug this in. Now, as a player controller, I'm now going to add or get the mapping context. So we click on this. I'm going to start typing enhanced, if I could spell. Oh, enhanced would help. And it's this get enhanced input local player subsystem. So we're going to click on that. It should look like this. What we need to do is make sure, as we're doing this, that it has one of these, basically, that it can find one. So I'm going to drag off here. I'm going to do a is valid command. I'm going to use this one with a question mark at the bottom, so make sure you have this one. I'm going to plug this in. This just stops it getting any errors. If it doesn't have this and it creates an error, it's going to break it. So this is just checking it. And we could have a thing that if it's not valid, if it isn't there, we could have a warning, or we could do it something else from this. But it won't break it. It'll kind of stop. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to tell it to use our mapping context. So we drag from this. I'm going to add mapping. And actually, if I might need to click off the context sensitive on this. And it says add mapping context, not the message, the actual add mapping context. So we have that there. So now if I go into our mapping context, this select asset, I can go in and I can choose my input mapping context. Okay. The last thing we need to do on this is actually tell it to have a target. So let's grab this as player controller. Actually, it's where are we? Oh, actually, might not need one in this because it's got self on it. Let's just double check. No, it's fine. We'll be able to tell because if I compile it, actually, okay, it is. Oh, so it is doing it this time. So yeah, that in the target. If I just compile now, you can see it gets rid of that error. So it's just where it's looking to add this mapping context to. I'm just going to neaten this up by creating a reroute node. So we just double click and we can put a reroute node in there. And just a little really useful thing if you like really tidy graphs. I'm going to select these two. I'm going to press Q and it will just even those up. So I can do the same with these. If I drag around all of these, I can press Q and it just aligns them all vertically. Okay. It also does it with these as well. If I click on that one first and then shift click on that one and press Q, it's going to line this one up. But just so I can see the input. I'm going to have that dragged down. That's fine. So let's compile and save that. And essentially that's that done. It's not going to do anything right now, but what it's doing is it's recognizing that we've actually got that controller set up, or that mapping context set up. So the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to use this. So if I right click, you've got to make sure you do compile and save this, otherwise you won't get it. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to start typing in IA underscore. So this is my input action. So my input action night run. Click on this and this becomes an event. So it's like a custom event. This is our input action that we made. So if I'd made one for jumping or anything else, we would get those as well. Okay. So just to show that this is working, I'm going to drag off the triggered. I'm going to do a print string. And let's say something like moving. So let's compile, let's save, go into our plate. There we go. So we click on my keys, there we go. We're saying moving. So obviously it's not doing anything, but it is getting that input. Just let that go. So you'll see if I try, I'm just pressing W and S here, it's not doing anything. I press A, or I press D, and it's doing exactly what I want it to do. So let's escape out of that. So now we need to make it actually move. So let's get rid of this. Now we know that that's working. And we have this character movement kind of built into the system. So what I can do now is we can add, I think it's player, let's add motion controller component. Is that the right one? No, it's add movement input. There we go. So let's link this up. Let's drag that into there. Again, I can click on this and press Q and just line that up. So what I want to do is want to find the right value and want to plug this into this scale value here. This is the thing that's going to make it go. So the way we need to do that is this action value here, but I can't just drag this in, because this is a vector, this is an individual scale value, see, individual float. So what we can do is we can right click over this and we can split struct pin. So it's all color coded. You can see now I've got green to green. So this is just telling me that I want to move on the X axis. So I've just got two on this. I've got the X and the Y because this was a 2D. If we set up the 3D one, we would have a Z. If we set up the 1D one, then we would just have an X value anyway. So I'm going to drag this in and drag this into the scale value here. If I just compile and save this, let's go to my thing, let's play it. Just click on the screen, pressing A and D, and it's still not doing anything right now. So let's escape. So the other thing we need to do is tell it which direction we're moving in. So we've got our X, Y, and Z direction. We're moving on the X direction, we're just moving this way. You can see here, you can see this relates to the arrow. So what I want to do is I just want to set this here and set this to a value of 1. Oops. There we go. Compile and save. If we go into this, press space, just left click. Now we've got this movement in here. Okay. So you get a bit of weirdness as we're moving about, and this is motion blur. So I'm going to just press escape and just quickly switch this off. So if I go into edit, I'm going to go into the project settings. Let's just type at the top motion blur. So here we go, motion blur. I'm going to switch this off. Going to close that down. So if I press play again, you can see you don't have it now. It looks okay on 3D objects, but on 2D objects and 2D sprites, it just doesn't work right. Okay. So we've got our player moving around. Obviously, the issue with it now is it's not running when it's moving around. But what I'll do is leave this video here and we'll tackle that in the next video.